Was the British Empire a force for good or for evil? Now, the British Empire is always a subject of debate, whether that's about its impact, its size, when it started, but perhaps one of the most discussed parts is its legacy. Some people argue that it was a force for good in the world and spread positive change, while others argue that it was an evil force that did a lot of harm. Now, for some context, at its peak, the British Empire controlled around a quarter of the world's land and population. So let's take a look at some of these debates, starting with those that argue that the empire was beneficial to the world. Supporters of the empire often cite the spread of infrastructure and technology, and across many colonies, ports, telegraph systems, and railways were built. For example, the railway network in India, built by the British during the 19th century, is still one of the world's largest railway networks today. Supporters also point to the establishment of global trade networks which have connected distant regions of the world together through shipping routes and markets. This has accelerated the process of globalization and economic interconnectedness. Supporters also refer to the implementation of political and legal institutions. Now, the British introduced many elements like parliamentary democracy, civil services, and common law traditions in these colonies. Many historians argue that British colonialism largely built long-lasting, durable institutions as opposed to other empires like the Spanish, who were largely extractive. Instead, the British colonies developed legal and administrative systems that continued after their independence. All of these factors arguably helped to shape and connect the modern world. However, critics of the British Empire usually argue that it was an evil force that primarily served Britain and not the people living under its imperial rule. They usually cite the violent and bloody conquest that was part of the empire's expansion. For example, the Indian Rebellion of 1857, which was an uprising against British colonial rule, was met with brutal suppression by the British, with an estimated toll of 800,000 lives. Imperial rule also included the suppression of local populations and the destruction of communities. Critics also point to the numerous and devastating famines that happened under the empire's rule. One of the most well-known examples is the Bengal famine of 1943, which resulted in the deaths of an estimated 3 million people. The violence and instability caused by imperial rule enabled large-scale resource extraction and looting, which economically weakened colonies and still to this day has left them significantly worse off. But perhaps one of the most widely cited criticisms of the British Empire was its propagation of slavery on an industrial scale. For over 300 years, the British dominated the transatlantic slave trade, which was also one of the largest forced migrations in history, forcibly transporting over 12 million enslaved Africans across the world for centuries. This caused a devastating loss of life, with numbers in the millions. Many supporters of the British Empire frequently argue that Britain was one of the first countries to abolish slavery, but critics point to the immeasurable suffering that Britain participated in the first place, as well as the fact that one of the main reasons for abolition was that slavery was no longer as economically profitable as it once was, rather than it being purely a moral endeavour. So how should history judge the British Empire? Should we judge it by the institutions and systems that it created and spread, or by the suffering that it caused?